At the outset of this case, and his lawyers have already made clear that they are planning a lot of motions. And those motions that we know are going to come, I mean, they haven't been filed yet, but there is a pattern here. There is a playbook that was really set forth in the prosecution of Manuel Noriega, the former de facto leader, warlord, so to speak, of Panama in the late 80s. And that playbook on the defense side is the individual is a head of state, therefore they have head of state immunity, regardless of the legality of the arrest in the sense of did it violate sovereignty of Venezuela? Did it violate treaties, UN charters? The courts in the United States are governed by US domestic law. However, our courts absolutely recognize within United States law that legitimate heads of state do have immunity. Now, it is without question that the government's position here is going to be that Maduro was not the legitimate head of state. They have taken that position for years. They took that position prior to his 2020 indictment. They've certainly taken that position regularly and very vocally. In the lead up to this arrest and to this grand jury indictment, they have put a $50 million bounty on his head. The United States is not putting $50 million bounties on other presidents if they believe it's the legitimate president or the legitimate ruler of that country. However, the defense is undoubtedly going to argue that he was the legitimate head of state, regardless of the results. They're going to have to somehow find a way around the results of this 2024 election where he was outvoted by a substantial amount. But they're going to say, regardless, he is the legitimate head of state. He has immunity for that. After the immunity question is resolved, and if it's resolved in favor of Maduro, case goes away, head of state immunity. The next challenge, probably after immunity or at the same time, is does the United States have personal jurisdiction, irrelevant of how the arrest, how they forcibly brought him to this country? Do they have jurisdiction to prosecute him for the acts that are charged in the indictment? Now, they have made very clear, the indictment makes very clear, our government has made very clear that these are prosecutions for narcoterrorism, drug trafficking acts using firearms in a conspiracy against the United States. These aren't charges related to how he ruled his country or even really corruption. The indictment does have allegations of corruption, and the word is used, but they have carefully crafted this indictment to make it very much this is a drug trafficker. This is someone who is leading a drug trafficking organization. We are treating him just like we treated El Chapo or other drug traffickers. And so we're going to proceed along that theory. There is no immunity for even a head of state who is committing criminal acts. So the defense team will likely file a motion saying that his decisions were acts, were the legitimate acts, or even if they are condemned, were the acts of head of state. But there is a lot of precedent to say that that argument is not likely to survive because it's going to be difficult to say that any sort of allegation regarding drugs and the dealing of drugs or the facilitation of drugs moving across borders is going to be considered a legitimate act, or even just an act within the powers of a foreign actor, which could bring him also sovereign immunity. I expect both of those arguments to fail.